So I read a lot of things every day. I read a lot of things on the weekend. I read books. I dig into original manuscripts. I study a lot of stuff. I try and keep up with current events, and I read a lot of people each day. And I came across a piece today that really it summed it all up for me. An absolutely brilliant piece written by Victor Davis Hanson. How are you, my friend?
Very good, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is, you sum it all up in your piece. Obama has just begun. How much damage can he do in his last year in office? And it's more than the subtitle. You go through, in a rather short essay, the history of the guy, the people who were willing to talk him up, the so-called prescient elites, the people who were saying, no, you better watch out for this guy, the rabble, I guess you would count me among them, and so forth. And then what the man has done and what he's going to do. You're really furious with this guy, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I was really struck by the irony that talk radio and the grassroots Tea Party House Republicans were supposed to be so anti-empirical, and yet they were the only people who actually knew something about Reverend Wright. They knew something about dreams from my father. They knew he had said things like the Supreme Court didn't go far enough in creating laws ex nihilo. They knew something about the fact that he was the most partisan senator in the U.S. Senate. They knew all that, and yet the people who were supposed to be so scientific and empirical, and I'm talking about Peggy Noonan, Kathleen Parker, David Brooks, I listed them, Christopher Buckley, they got into the yes we can moronic mania, and they did a lot of damage, is what I'm trying to say. And now we have to face it, we all are upset that he's there, and he's going to do a lot of damage executively, but he's essentially almost destroyed the Democratic Party. They lost the Senate, House, governorships, legislature. All they've got is the culture, academia, foundations, Hollywood, but legislative, electorally, he's really done them a lot of damage because people are sick of him. And he knows that, and he's mad now that he came into the world to save you and me, and we didn't appreciate him. And then this last year, whether it's what we see in the Middle East or his tinkering around with climate change, executive fiats, or immigration, whatever it is, he's going to do things, I'm afraid, predicated on what he thinks is most likely to get people angry at him.
So he's doing. I agree with this completely. So he's actually doing things in many respects. He gets even more outrageous and aggressive when he thinks the people don't want done what he's doing to us. Isn't that what you're saying?
Yeah, I do. I think that why after the Charlie Hebdo thing would he make a big push to close down Guantanamo? Or why, when we have all of these refugees and things like that, would he let felons out of prison or basically dismantle federal immigration law or talk about sending even more Syrian refugees? He knows the people don't want it. He knows people in his own party will have a difficulty running on that in 2016, but he has this weird idea that I spoke truth to power, I'm a martyr, I'm a victim, and I'm mad at these people because they didn't help me have a successful presidency. And boy, there's a lot of people around the world, whether in North Korea or Iran or Putin or ISIS or whoever they are, they're looking and they think, we've never seen anything like this. This is a rare opportunity to make territorial adjustments at the expense of the post-war global order, because this guy's not invested in it, and there's very little likelihood that he'll do anything if we do something that otherwise would be quite stupid. So I think it's a really dangerous year that we're facing in the next 12 months.
And yet, here we have this enemy that is vile, that is genocidal, that will slaughter at will. We know about the torture and the enslavement and the raping and the beheadings and so forth. And yet, almost knee-jerk, almost like Tourette's, when he gets behind a microphone, America's not tolerant, we're not following American... Have you ever seen anything like this?
No, I haven't, but people have made this common observation, and you can't disagree with it, that he really does believe that Islamic terrorism is either not very serious or there's something, as to paraphrase Kerry, legitimate or rationale behind it. It's a little excessive, but there are root causes in the post-war order that created it, mostly Western, and therefore he doesn't want to really react to it or to demonize it or even to identify it, because he thinks that it has some legitimacy, and maybe the terror, while it would be unfortunate, and if it's contained and it's episodic, maybe it will teach us a larger lesson about the social causes or the root causes that cause this stuff. And I think that's where he's coming from. And it's also final thing, it's also predicated on this elite idea that we see across his administration, that the ramifications of his ideology he never has to accept, and his elite and his class never have to put their kids in schools where illegal aliens come in. And believe me, Syrian refugees are not going to go to Martha's Vineyard. And he always and climate change, he can take this. He said the other day that what he's going to miss most is having his private plane. And so there's this idea among this particular wealthy elite liberal class that we have all these utopian ideas, but that they fall on little people that we don't really have a lot of empathy for.
Let me ask you this. You're an expert, you're a scholar, particularly in ancient history, Greece, Rome. Do you see any parallels with Rome or Sparta?
I do. I'm afraid that there was no reason why Rome in the latter part of the 5th century A.D. fell. I mean, it had 70 million people, had 1 million miles of square. They hadn't done anything differently than the last 2 centuries, where when faced with crises, they always had a renaissance and made the necessary adjustments. And in the East, the Byzantines survived for 1,000 years. And so there were these 2-bit Vandals, Visigoths, Ostrogoths that came across the border. And if you read contemporary accounts, there was this same naivete. We can Christianize these people. They're not really pernicious. They come in small numbers. We'll integrate them. But what they didn't realize is the Roman imperial class had really forgot what it was to be Roman. They didn't believe it was better than the alternative. And so they didn't defend their culture, they didn't define it, and they allowed people from the Danube and the Rhine to cross and really destroy something that could have been.
Uh-oh. Did we just lose Victor Davis Hanson? We'll get him back. Is that our technology or his? We have no idea what just happened. We were zapped. That's all we know. We'll get him back, but now you know why I have him. And I want to pursue this comparison with the Roman Empire because Rome existed essentially for 500 years, for half 1,000 years. But we're not even close to that right now. And there clearly are parallels, which I was talking about. Was it last week? It was last week. Do we have VDH back?
Yeah, I don't think. Guess something happened on the line.
Yeah, they're out to get us. But anyway, go ahead. I want to hear this because this is very important.
There was no intrinsic reason why Rome needed to collapse or implode in the late 5th century A.D., but it wasn't that the external threat was that great. They had done much better against much greater enemies like Hannibal for 600 years earlier, but at this particular point in their history, they didn't know what it was to be Roman. They didn't think it was any better than the alternative, so when they had these small, pretty manageable threats like the Vandals or the Visigoths or the Ostrogoths or the Huns, when they came across the Rhine and the Danube, they were just panicked. They thought they could integrate them. They thought that they could teach them of the values of Christianity. They thought if they were Christian, they would be Italian Roman Christian, and that didn't turn out to be the case. And so when societies like ours or any postmodern Western society don't know what was the ingredients of their original success, or they don't appreciate that these values have to be renewed and strengthened, or that they don't have any link in the chain of Americanism or exceptionalism, they don't feel any affinity for the people at Iwo Jima or Okinawa or Gettysburg, then there's no law, Mark, in history that says you have an inherent right to exist forever. History's pretty mean, and if we don't believe that we're who we are, and I don't think most kids today or most adults going to define what an American is or what America is, and there's no reason for it to continue if we don't believe it's better than the alternative. And we're seeing that in the Middle East and this reaction that we're having. The suicide, we see it in Europe, but it's coming here too.
This is a daunting problem, though, isn't it? When you look at the academy, when you look at the culture, when you look at politics today, it's really all headed in the wrong direction, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's basically a group of very affluent, leisured people who feel that they're exempt from, as I said, the consequences of their ideology, and they reach some kind of material nirvana that they don't really understand where their granite counters come from, where their beef that they buy in the store comes from, where their water, their electricity, all that's taken care of by sort of smelly, muscular people that live in places like Akron, Ohio, or Bakersfield. And we see them in California along the coast, and they're sort of like H.G. Wells's Eloy. They're very effete, refined people, and they do a lot of damage. They really do, because they always assume that this idea or this notion or this theory will make me feel so good about myself, and it makes so much perfect sense in the faculty lounge or at a Malibu party. And if it doesn't work out well, these people deserve what they get.
Why do you think people like Peggy Noonan and Brooks and these other people were so easily bamboozled? Is it because they wanted to be bamboozled?
I think they have a particular value system that's different than most Americans. They live on that coastal corridor. They believe that a man or a woman is judged by the brand of the university they went, a Harvard degree, in Obama's case. They value rhetoric over works or muscularity. So a guy like the Koch brothers or somebody who builds a real business or runs a 7-Eleven even, they don't admire as much of the degree from Harvard, even though it's much easier to get a degree from Harvard than it is to actually run a business. And so they have a very warped value system, and Obama, unfortunately for us, became their perfect storm. He was rhetorically astute. He didn't have the African-American Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson experience that white liberals don't feel comfortable with. If his name had been what it used to be, Barry Dunham, it wouldn't have been so exotic. But Barack Hussein Obama just pushed all of their multicultural buttons. And then he had a blank slate, so they filled it in the way that they thought it should be filled in, and then demonized as racist anybody who begged to differ, that the evidence didn't support their, hope and change theories.